from the poverty and helplessness coupled by blind obedience at the bottom of the pyramid of polygamy to the top, where the wealth is extreme and the rules and dual standards are as well. Inside polygamy in the United States of America today. Ed Kociela, newspaperman, he investigates what he reports, and he spends years doing it. I want to thank Ed Kociela for a great interview and for his integrity and honesty. I am the voice behind the camera, and once again, I'm honored to interview Ed Kociela.
The FLDS God, as I understand it, is nothing like the God that I know or feel that I have a relationship with. I don't see forgiveness, I don't see kindness, compassion, warmth, and love as I was raised to believe, or as I have developed to believe God to be. I see a vengeful God, I see a mean, angry God, I see a demanding, overbearing, interfering, unshakable deity that does not deal in fairness, does not deal in forgiveness, does not deal in truth. I mean, looking through tenets and dogma and doctrine, of course, there are so many inconsistencies in Revelations. There are so many inconsistencies in interpretations. There are so many different kinds of beliefs of, as he's referred to most commonly, the Heavenly Father and His Son, who is a man as opposed to a deity, but is a deity. This is where all the confusion comes in. When you start talking to them about that, about the belief structure, about the foundation and roots of the religion and all, it's then when you start seeing the ends of that rope start to unravel and you don't get clear answers. It's intentionally vague, it's intentionally misleading, because then if you turn around and ask a question and it's a probing type of a question, because I know I've had it happen to me, it's, oh, well, you weren't raised that way, so you don't understand. You can't possibly understand because you weren't raised in that. You weren't part of that religion or culture, so you can't possibly understand. There are a lot of us who have studied a lot. You know, I came to this area 18 years ago and saw the people around here, wanted to learn about the community that I was in, wanted to learn about the people who comprised it. And so I studied and I learned and I talked to people. I opened books and read them to try and understand. I felt it was incumbent on me to do that. If I'm going to be somewhere, I want to know who the people are. I want to know how they got there. I want to know what their thoughts are, their beliefs, what their dreams are, what they've been through. And so, yeah, I would think that somewhere along the line you'd pick up some knowledge that's never reflected in answers you get when you ask questions, particularly if they're sort of embarrassing questions. I mean, I can remember having discussions with people about, well, why did it take until, late 70s to allow African Americans priesthood? How come we have a church participating against the Equal Rights Amendment and having poured millions of dollars into that effort from when it began to this very day? How can we legally have a church unit divert funds to go into the California campaign to overturn Prop 8? how can they get away with this? How can they divert the funds? And we know that they put several $1 million into that campaign. They paid to have people from Utah, and this is mainstream church at this point, they paid to have people from Utah go to California and work in the campaign to overturn it. That's illegal. So if mainstreamers are doing it, then my question is what's happening when we have the various offshoots and the sects that are out there already defrauding the government, already abusing our children, already denying them of an education, and already creating havoc within these small communities that, you know, traditionally small-town America is a lovely place.
It is.
Not out there. It's deserted, it's dirty, it's dusty, it's unfriendly, it's
a prison of the mind.
It's a sense of evil.
Yes, it's a prison of the mind.
Yes.
And what happens to people when they try to get out? How about the lost boys? You mentioned them a while back. Explain that.
They're crushed. They don't, one of the problems when we talk about child abuse, you know, it's not only beating a child, it's not only sexually abusing a child. Child abuse is not being nurtured. Child abuse is not being given the full opportunity to education. Child abuse is not getting the opportunity to grow and explore and to be a child. Okay? These are young men who come out of the community so ill prepared that they are just unable to deal. We know a particular young man who's living in Southern California right now who is a lost boy, was tossed out of the community at about 15. He's now coming up on 18. And he was not prepared. He was uneducated. He had to learn some basic skills. He was so frightened and so brainwashed by what he had been raised with that when the Boston Marathon attack took place, we saw him post on Facebook, "Oh my God, is this the end of the world? Is this Warren's prophecy coming true?" Because Warren Jeffson made a prophecy from his jail cell that blood would run in the streets, there would be explosions, and the prison walls would melt so he could escape. And this poor young boy thought that that's what was occurring. He's very fragile. He's been through a horrific existence. He ended up tangled up with drugs and alcohol, which he's getting straightened out. He doesn't know how to relate to people. The mention of names from his old community sent him into a screaming panic. He was physically and we believe sexually abused. He is just in kind of a PTSD situation. We know of another young man who's living in Las Vegas who is trying to educate himself. A young man named Willie Steve. He's a lost boy who was tossed out on the street without the ability to read. He could not read. He could not spell cat if he spotted in the CMA.
And isn't this lack of ability to have even a basic education extremely common?
It's very common. We had a situation within the past year when it was time for the pecan harvest out in the community. Kids were supposed to be in school. There were photographers and there were people who were out in the area through the harvesting period taking pictures of these kids working in the fields instead of being in school or instead of being homeschooled. They are put to work. The boys are put to work in the construction companies or in the various factories and things that they have out there in the Short Creek area, which range from companies that help to build local, state, and federal buildings to contracting with the Department of Defense, with the United States military. There is a manufacturing company out there that makes tools and parts for the U.S. military under government contract, because they can outbid, because they have kids from 5 years old on up working at these sites, picking up the debris, working as a cleanup crew. There are kids out there who are framing houses at 10, 11, 12 years old. There are kids out there driving bulldozers and backhoes at 12 and 13 years old. You know, they have this really uncanny knack for being able to disappear like that the minute a building inspector comes to the site. But that's how the businesses are run. They're church owned. They can outbid everybody else because they don't pay the labor, and so they get all of these contracts. You know, there's a trust company out there that does, truthfully, from what I understand, they do very good work, but they outbid everybody because they have underage boys out there working.
And kids with no medical insurance.
No medical insurance,
nothing.
No benefits, no anything.
No wages, no nada.
And again, underage.
My brother started out in construction like that. This is not a new thing. And education for me was a fraud. I got an 8th grade diploma, a minus 5th grade education. When I went to Las Vegas, I didn't know who the President of the United States was. I only knew who God's mouthpiece on earth was.
Well, as I understand it, if you go out into the community and you ask who the President is, they will tell you Warren Jeffs.
There you go. And he was more important, and his law was more important than the laws of man, because all man was evil except him.
Yes. Tragic.
People don't get that this slavery, and it is slavery, it's a prison of the mind, starting to indoctrinate these babies, is going on in the United States. We'd rather look across the pond and look at somebody else.
It's a modern-day tragedy, if you ask me. It's tantamount to the beheadings and the stonings that go on in the Middle East. It's a complete antithesis of what we're supposed to have as basic freedoms in this country. It goes against the grain in every way, shape, or form. It's illegal, it's immoral, and illogical.
Yeah. Concepts of education, how do you see them, Ed?
I see them as non-existent. Last time we were out in that community, we went past the elementary school, and the weeds in the yard were 6 feet tall. The dirt and grime on the windows looked like a 1/4 inch thick. It looked like nobody had stepped foot on those facilities for years. We understand that what occurred was that through the various political and religious pressure that was placed upon the school district from Warren and his followers, that they had built some new schools, that they had bought new desks, new books, new facilities, new everything.
All government funded.
All government funded. They had an airplane that they bought for the Colorado City Board of Education, so that way the members of the board could fly from Colorado City to Flagstaff or Phoenix for state Board of Education meetings. All of that went out the window because the minute it all happened, Warren ordered homeschooling for every child. There's a high school out there that still has a few students attending it, but for the most part, education takes place in the home, supposedly. Never mind that the enforcement or the evaluation of the kids never really takes place, which is a fault of the Utah state government, who has consistently turned a blind eye to the crimes of polygamy and bigamy through previous Attorney General, Mark Shurtleff, and the current Attorney General, John Swallow. So education is non-existent. They don't go to school. The children are not tested on the homeschooling as they should be, and nobody is overseeing it.
And aren't there almost no high school graduates compared to how many people have gone to that school for years and years and years?
Well, it's because they get turned out to work in, as we said, in the construction companies, in the metal shop prefab operation, in the fields. That's what happened. The kids that are attending the high school are turned out from the high school because they are placed full time into the construction companies, the metal shop prefab companies, the fields to work in the agriculture that's out there. Nonetheless, taxpayer money goes to build the school. Taxpayer money goes to fund the teachers who were in the area, all of whom, by the way, were members of the church. So the kids get pulled out of school. There are no students to attend the school. Teachers are out of work. So guess what? Who starts collecting unemployment, additional welfare benefits, starts again in another direction, bleeding the beast, because suddenly they don't have jobs because there aren't any kids in the school. A school that was built on land owned, purchased from the FLDS church, and again another source of profit for the profit. So it's this cycle of knowing how to, as a newspaper guy, you're trained to follow the money, and there are so many money trails out there that it's unbelievable.
I want you to follow the money trail on the interbreeding. Are you familiar with Formosi disease?
Yes, that's unbelievable. Yes, I'm familiar with it. Up until about 1990, there were only 13 reported cases of it throughout the entire world, and none of them in the United States. However, in the recent decade that has passed, there have been 20 incidents that have been reported in the Short Creek area, all pretty much within a 3-block radius.
Explain what that disease is.
The disease is it's sort of a Down syndrome sort of disease where it interrupts the brain patterns, makes the sufferers incapable of functioning on their own, eating, the daily functions that we go through just to exist, drinking, hygiene. The people who suffer from this are unable to take care of themselves. They are severely disabled in the fact of having been so inbred over the years since they ended up in Short Creek. It's said that there are 2, maybe 3 family bloodlines that run through the entire population out there. They have intermarried so much with cousins, in some instances brothers and sisters, half brothers, and that this deficiency is starting to become more and more common within the kids. There's a problem in trying to really study that, and we don't know exactly where it is right now because under medical and legal restrictions from HIPAA, those documents are not easily accessible. Even researchers are having a problem getting hold of them to explore it more. So, we really don't know how extensive it is beyond the 20 that we did know that had occurred. I mean, there could be many, many more.
And this disease is caused from interbreeding?
The disease is caused from interbreeding.
When it comes to the benefits of this disease, don't these parents of these children receive Social Security and various benefits that are higher with a child like that than they do the average child?
Well, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we were seeing in Buster Johnson's press release was the inordinate number of medical visits that took place. It's way out of proportion for the size of the town. And first of all, there's the benefit because when the child is born in that kind of a situation, the birth certificates are fallacious. We don't know who the father is. Sometimes we're not exactly sure, of the mother's legality and all that sort of thing. I mean, they are created for a woman to be able to go in and immediately say, I'm a single mom and I don't know who the father is and we need benefits. So they get signed up immediately. Now, the additional benefits that occur when you have a child with a disease, of course you're going to have medical payments that are going out. That's going to happen. There are going to be doctor visits. There's going to be medicine that's needed. There's going to be special equipment that you may need. These kids can't just be turned out to play in a yard, for example. They can't interact socially very well because they don't have the ability to. So the interactions, the medical problems, the bills, they all add up, and that again is on the tab. And there's also the thought and the wonder, because a lot of these kids don't live long.
Right.
How long those benefits will continue even after the child is gone? Is there a certificate of death that is filed?
Well, the certificates of birth are phony for the illegitimate children.
So
my father insisted that the birth certificates of all of my mother's children were forged. Andrea Emmett Moore wrote a book called God's Brothel and found that to be true throughout the various cults. She was an investigative reporter. And so this happened. So this is real common. The doctor that wrote about this and went into Colorado City to teach the women what was causing it did not know that these women had no choice.
Well, again, the public misconception. Back in 1953, when they had what they still refer to as the raid, when the Arizona governor set the National Guard, called in troops, and all of the northern Arizona law enforcement agencies to go into the community and remove everyone because of what was occurring there, what happened was there was a tremendous backlash of sympathy for the polygamists in the community who were taken away. There were, particularly as I recall, the Life magazine story that was very highly illustrated of crying children being separated from mothers and all created a huge backlash of public sympathy. This was 1953, where people got angry because they felt that it was a terrible, terrible thing for the government to go in and separate mothers and children and take families and put the dads and moms in jail and put the kids into protective custody and remove them. And there was a huge backlash. It cost the governor his job. Next election, he was tossed. And
do you think this is why Mark Shurtleff and John Swallow won't touch it? Because there are so many thousands of people that don't understand what's going on, and the propaganda out there to sell polygamy is blue ribbon.
No, I don't. I think Mark Shurtleff and John Swallow are personally invested through religion to propagate polygamy. I think it is so ingrained within their system, belief system. I think that they are part of the nod and a wink mainstream LDS church that still approves of it. I think that for them to go against what was an original teaching, D&C 132, would be an abomination in their eyes and a violation of their church beliefs. No, I think religion has everything to do with it. I would certainly like to see how much money comes in or came into the Shurtleff or Swallow campaigns from Hilldale, Utah, from the businesses that work out there, that was funneled in as a result of their support. No, I do not think that it has anything to do with a misunderstanding. I think they understand it perfectly clear, and I think that they choose to ignore it on the grounds that if they don't, then maybe they'll be thrown into the eternal darkness.
In the 1950s, during that dramatic raid, they played the same crying game they played at Yearning for Zion with Warren, and the same public plea. However, in the 1950s, Life magazine featured a man named Clyde Mackert. He had 3 age-appropriate wives. He was a school teacher. He was the media's darling polygamist man, the holiness, the wonderful man he was. Clyde Mackert was married to 2 of my sisters. Today, we have 5 of his children standing up and say how he sexually molested them. He was going to get their virginity before he gave them away. Now, the public never knows beyond the big play of how great polygamy is. And these stories keep coming up and coming up and coming up. Tom Green, another one. 4 child brides, 3 were his stepdaughters. One of them 13 years old. Television's darling polygamist. Lifestyle choice. Okay?
Well, the Tom Green situation is further evidence that even though that happened in current times, very current times as far as history is concerned, the people of Judd County still adhered to the old belief. The county attorney in that case, who was the brother of the man who was at that time governor of the state of Utah, was very courageous in prosecuting. And what happened to him after the prosecution was successful? The voters tossed him out because he dared to prosecute and win his prosecution.
So in the state of Utah, religion trumps human rights.
Religion trumps human rights. It was very courageous when the Washington County attorney actually did file, even though they were rather shallow charges, against Warren Jeffs in the Alyssa Wall case, where she was forced at 14 to marry her cousin. I thought it was a remarkably courageous thing for them to do at that point. You know, we hadn't seen somebody actually go after, if you will, the big fish.
Right.
And for him, even though the charges were rape as an accomplice, and even though the judge messed up in his jury instructions, which meant that when the case was appealed, the conviction was overturned, it was still a very courageous thing to do at that time. And we're talking about within the past 10 years.